curious if, since you're watching a lot of hockey on the couch these days, what did you get a chance to watch the game last night between Canada and the U.S.?
I watched half of it just before we started here now, but it's a lot of fun watching it. It's unbelievable, the pace, the level. Obviously, the final game was not the same page as the first Canada-US game, but just the skill level and the best players in the world playing each other again. It's hockey world has been waiting a long time for these kind of games.
Yeah, we sure have, and just as I've learned a little bit about maybe aspects of the game that you prioritize, when you watch that best on best competition, do you sense that there's maybe a bit of a hybrid in terms of just the style and particularly the focus on making plays and possessing the puck?
I would say like yes and no. Like you have the most skilled players in the world, and the fastest skaters in the world. You see the McKinnons and the McDavids are just unleashed, and I think the coaches with a limited amount of time with those guys just focus on like how can we simplify the game for them and unleash the skill level and the talent as much as possible. And I think that becomes even more clear when in those national team tournaments when you have a very limited time as a coach with the players and you want to simplify your message as much as possible and just let them go.
How valuable of an exercise do you think that is as a coach to be put in that sort of environment? As you say, you've got limited time both on the ice and just in general to communicate to your team. Just the exercise of saying, I've got to be as clear and direct as possible, and how that might just influence your communication as a coach at all times.
I actually think that's one of the hardest things in coaching, filtering down information and simplifying your message as much as possible. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the coach, it's about the players. And the more you can simplify your message to them or clarify your message to them, the quicker they can make decisions on the ice. And the easier it is for them to solve situations in a tenth of a second or a hundredth of a second. So we don't try to micromanage them too much or complicate the game too much for them.
I've become fascinated, and just by way of being really fortunate to connect with coaches and leaders like yourself at the care and process that goes into from when a coach first thinks about the message to the point that they actually communicate it. I'd almost compare it to, for example, when they talk about Saturday Night Live and how it's like a full week of just rehashing the script until it's nailed. It would appear to me that there's almost a similar process that goes into a coach finally delivering that message. What sort of process might you go through, or how do you trim down the message that you might ultimately deliver to your players?
I think that's one of the main challenges as a head coach, making sure that you have access to so much information. And the staffs around the teams are growing by the year now, and you have different or new titles all the time, but new tools and new people helping out around the team, and they all bring what can I say, like a special skill to the table, but they cannot be used all at the same time. So you process like with the analytics that you get access to nowadays, and all the different angles on the video and all, like you process a lot of information, and how to filter down that information to a topic or to a message that you feel is absolute most important right now for the team. I think that goes a lot of work into that, and I would say normally the team or the players get maybe a 2% or between 2 and 5% of
Yeah.
the processed information goes out to the team. Maybe a little bit more because maybe 2% goes to the whole team as a group, and another 5% goes to the individual players that you work with, that the different coaches work with. But as a group, usually nowadays, when you play 3 games a week, the information and that they can process is very limited. So uh, I would say it's a very important skill as a coach to be able to filter down and simplify as much as possible.
That's so interesting, and I know that we obviously work in sports. We spend a lot of time looking at, say, business and then the tech community and how those organizations operate. And saying no would appear to be a superpower, because when you say no to one thing, you're actually saying yes to something else that you value more, that's going to have a greater impact on business, your team, etc. Um, as you get into the stretch drive of your season and head towards the playoffs, what are you saying yes to, and what maybe are you saying no to?
I believe going into the final stage of the regular season, hopefully heading into the postseason, you're like a result of the habits that you created along the way, and hopefully you're getting closer to that stage when the players find what a lot of people call the flow, when they can just act without thinking too much. They act on instincts, but those instincts are built over time in practice, in repetitions, in hearing the same message in different ways over time, maybe with different terminology and different words, and from different people, but it's been repeated consciously and unconsciously to them over the whole season. And if you've done a good enough job, hopefully they establish some sound good habits that will allow them to get lucky in the postseason, allow them to play their best when the stakes are at the highest. And that's what we're all aiming for. But obviously, easier said than done.
No doubt. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but I listened to an interview you had given, and I believe the way that you described it is that actions inform habits, and habits inform culture. Within your team as a coach, how are you intentional about maybe not forcing players to acquire certain habits, but more so guiding players to inherit the habits that'll make a difference on the ice?
I think that's like the culture word is something that all companies or organizations are trying to create and highlight, and they have posters on the wall and nice PowerPoint presentations, but I don't think all of us or all of them are actually doing any kind of follow up, like what is actually the culture. And I believe that the culture is a result, the end result of your behavior, and you can drive it either further back, and it starts with your values. And that's something I try to involve the team in the start of the season. Like, what are the core values of this team? Obviously, we give them the organization's core values, like this is our philosophy, this is our strategy, this is what we want to be, what we want our identity as an organization. But now we put this group of guys together. What is going to be the core values of this team? Like, how is it going to show? What do we want others to say about us? And how are we going to make that happen? And there we come into the behavior part of it.
That's fascinating. And is that an exercise that you would go through every year? I don't sense you have that much turnover roster wise in the Swiss league. And if so, does that, how the players characterize their group, does that change much year to year?
Depends on like the turnover on the roster, obviously, but
Yeah.
hopefully you can keep a core group of guys on your team for a longer stint and a longer amount of time, and those guys will be your ambassadors. and during the season and where we are right now, like they're coaching the team as much as I'm coaching the teams, or the coaching staff is coaching the team. And we talk a lot about the shared ownership of different things. Like what is the coaches? What do we need to take ownership for? What are the players need to take ownership for, and the management and so on. So everybody has clear roles and can be they have clear responsibility and can also be held accountable for those that responsibility. Now that sounded negative, but hopefully they feel involved, and when you're feeling involved in something, it's also you get their commitment.
One of my um, the shows that I would watch if I have time to kill or that I would have on the background is it's called A Football Life. The NFL puts it out, and they've got this great documentary on Bill Belichick, but not with the New England Patriots when he's with the Cleveland Browns, his first head coaching job. And it's this he put together this amazing collection of young people that all went on to be head coaches, general managers, and have great success in the game. But at the time, they called them slappies, like they were making no money, and they were just doing grunt work. But what they collectively all said about that experience, that the Bill's superpower was that the job description for every one of them, and not just the title, but specifically, this is what you need to be accountable for every single day, was so clearly defined that he said it was really easy for everybody to function. So, with what you just said, are you perhaps able to give some examples of when you talk about that ownership and accountability? I mean, you've got left wingers, right wingers, centermen, goalies, etc. You've got assistant coaches, analytics people. Um, what might be that next layer of direction that you give as a coach to say, you're the video coach, but here's specifically what I need from you, or hey, you're our first power play defenseman, but you're on our third pairing, and here's how I might define the value that you need to bring to the group.
You already try to do that in the recruitment process. So when you recruit a coach on your staff or you recruit a player to your team, that you can really, before they sign a contract, clarify, hey, we like you, we see you in this role, this is what we would expect from you, and this is what you can expect from me as a coach or from us as an organization. I think that's the, can I say, the base of a happy relationship, or a
Yeah,
successful relationship. That hey, yeah, you sell some soft factors as well as so they don't only ask like what is my salary going to look like, how much are you going to pay
yeah,
me,
yeah.
uh, how does the role look, how what do you expect from me, and what can I expect coming to your organization or to your team, or being on your staff. And that's always something I try to, not only in the recruitment process, but every day on every practice or every game day. I'm the last one speaking when we're sitting around the table discussing a game plan, for example, or we're evaluating last night's game. I try to ask all my assistant coaches first, like, tell me about this and that, or your areas. What was good? What was not? And when everybody talks or presents within their areas, we decide what is the most important thing right now for our team. What do we want to? What do we need to show to the team? What do we need to show to certain individuals? What is the message going to be like? And some nights it's, or some days it's more from one assistant coach than another one, but I expect all of them to bring something to the table, because I know from experience when the head coach speaks first, everybody nods their heads, so it almost falls off and agrees, and that's what you don't want. Then you get no dynamics in that coaching staff, or new ideas or different perspectives on things that, um, I believe that you get when everybody's allowed to, or you're expected to say something in those meetings.
It was that perhaps a learned observation, or did you sort of acquire that skill set or strategy from someplace outside of hockey? Because I think I mean, you and I are from the same vintage, and probably came from a place where the head coach spoke first and last and
Yes.
in between?
Actually, when I stopped playing, I had a normal job, if you can call it that, before I went
Heard
into
of
pro
those?
coaching.
Yeah.
And I got some, that's where I actually got in more interested in coaching, because when I played, I had no interest in coaching
Really?
at all. If somebody asked me when I was playing if you wanted to become a coach, I said no chance, no way. And if you ask somebody that I play with, they would say he's no chance. He's never going to be become a coach. But like life takes you in different directions, and I worked in a construction company where I had a team of 15 guys that I was it the team leader of or in charge of, and I got some did some leadership courses, and I found it very interesting, and I also studied some social psychology because it triggered my interest, and I felt like, hey, this is something I never had from coaches when I played, and I want to try to change the when I say the culture or
Sure.
the traditions in coaching and do something different. So I come in with something different, and I believe when I first came in, asking those questions, nobody would expect it. But I believe now, like I've been here for 7 years in Zug, and now my assistant is going to take over when I leave next year, and he's going to be the sixth assistant coach in 7 years that moved on to a head coach position
Really?
in
What a
professional
stat.
league. So hopefully I empower them and trigger them to be their best, and also move on to bigger challenges or greater challenges.
When you were working in the construction business and you were taking some of these leadership courses, like outside of the value of asking questions, let's say, was there anything else when you reflect back on that time that really stood out to you to say, hey, this still exists in my coaching or leadership DNA, and I pulled it from that seminar or that training session?
Actually, the first thing we did there, we did the leadership course that was from the military. Um, and you were together for a week, small group of people. I think it were eight people from different companies that worked together for like 5 nights, Monday through Friday, and but you worked together 24/7. So long days, and you got to know each other pretty well. But more importantly, you got to know yourself pretty well. And I think that's step number one in leadership is to understand yourself, to know yourself, and to stay true to yourself. So you know your strengths, your weaknesses. You know how you act under pressure in stressful situations, and you allow yourself to balance yourself. If I put it that way. So that was probably the most important lesson I learned during that time.
So with that being said, you talk about the value of asking questions to your staff and and players. When you're driving, say, to the rink on a practice day, or perhaps driving home after a game, what sort of questions do you ask yourself to keep yourself in check?
I try to change perspectives. So what is the players what are the players thinking right now? What would be their perspective of last night's game or loss or win or whatever situation we might find ourselves in? What do they need right now? And how can I provide that? So I would say that's the first thing I try to do before I put my game plan together or a message together on a practice day, is to get other people's perspective in first, and then put mine on in there somehow, but not first. So like I said, with the coaches, listen to them, hear where they're at, what's important for them, and why, and then I can and have no prestige. So I can say I like what I'm hearing here. I like your message. I had a different approach, but I like yours better than mine. So let's go with your message there. I think that's better today. So that's sometimes that makes you sound smarter than you really are because you steal other people's ideas as well, right?
When I hear that, Dan, it's, you go back to the actions part, and that's culturally, like, listening to somebody else and that's an action. And I would just highlight that, and I take a lot of notes here, but that, I think we always think of actions as sort of something physical, but I think that just that action of saying, "Hey, I like your idea. We're going to use it." How much that would vibrate through a team or organization. I've also heard you reference that, as a coach, that, effectively you're a salesman, and you've got to not just deliver a message, you have to sell a message. I thought that was interesting because I've often, when I get asked about, the coaches that we work with, I'm like, I said, they're kind of like trial lawyers. Like, they could make any case, but they've got to get up in front of a group of people, and they got to have a thesis, and they have to back it up and defend it, and they've got to convince people that they're right. And it doesn't mean there's only one way to be right. When it comes to that salesman aspect of your role, what have you learned about helping people, maybe see it from your perspective, or just, get on your side?
To first of all understand their perspective, so you know
Yeah.
where they're coming from,
Yeah.
and read the room a little bit. You made the metaphor of a trial lawyer, and a trial lawyer, they get to pick the jury, right?
True. Yeah.
So you have to understand the jury, who you're speaking to, and how am I going to sell something to that jury or to these people. And I think that's important for a hockey team as well. You got a team of 25 to 30 players, right? And you're going to have 25 to 30 different personalities as well. So you can't treat them all the same. But you got to try to create a relationship with those guys and find out, okay, how do they tick?
Yeah.
How do I reach out to this player compared to that player? How do I talk to them? How do I coach him? How do I approach him? So I think that's step number one. And then I believe in any conversation, you want somebody to open up and not be defensive. The more questions you ask, the more they will open up. That they have to know, trust, and understand that your intentions are good. You're trying to help them. You're not trying to trick them or so, like, establishing that trust relationship is probably the most important thing that you have to do as a coach, because if they are on defense, you'll not get through to them. But if you get them to have an open mind, and if you get them to open up what they're really thinking, usually you can help them find the answers on their own. So I give you an example. Instead of going to a player with the computer and you say, "Hey, now look at this. Look at what happens here. Like, we can't have any more of this or that or this or that."
Sure.
I would go to him and I would say, "All right, take a look at this. Tell me what you see." And I would ask him, okay, if he's not happy with it, or if it's a bad clip, obviously, I would ask him, like, if you got to do it again, what would you have done differently?
Yeah.
And if I'm still not happy with the answer he gives me, I might say, okay, what would happen if you did this?
Yeah.
And he would come up with the answer sooner or later. And I think when the player comes up with the answer, he feels that he owns it.
Absolutely.
And there you find his commitment to change it or improve it or work on it as well. Instead of me telling him what to do, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do better on this, and that. Then he's going to be, oh, yeah, okay, okay, I hear you.
Love that. Love that.
So I think
Um,
it's a big difference between getting a player wanting to do something instead of having to do something. That's something we work with a lot. Like, does he want to do it or does he have to do it? Because you can tell from their body language or their presence normally.
yeah. And, we it's funny. We talked about the Canada USA game, for example. And, one of the observations I had is you have a lot of players that are probably doing things on the ice that perhaps they wouldn't typically be as responsible for, you know, with their club teams. But because of the stakes, because of the environment, because of a whole host of things, they clearly want to do these things. They want to work above pucks. They want to, ensure there's no odd man rushes against. They want to have great sticks and doing a lot of the things that, maybe, players aspirationally don't spend a lot of time thinking about. Um, how do you, when it comes to those parts of the game, because again, I'm not going to profess that I've gone out and scouted 20 zoo games in preparation for this, but I do look at the stats. Your team seems to skew offensively, and in a couple of your more recent seasons, you've been far and away the clubhouse leader when it comes to putting the puck in the net. So that's one part of the equation. But how do you still? I mean, you don't win championships without taking care of your play without the puck. How do you balance those two aspects of the game um, with your players?
Well, it's a good question, and I wish there was an easy, quick answer to it. But I would say this, that I believe in having a concept based message. Like we talked about the best on best US Canada
Yeah,
Four Nations tournament going on right now. Limited amount of time to work with the players. You need to have a clear message. Okay, this is what we're doing away from the puck. This is what we're doing in the different zones and so on. And for me, it's like without the puck, there you need a little bit more structure. With the puck, you want to provide time, space, and a clear objective. What we want to happen. We want to get the puck in the net. All right. How do we make that happen on an entry? How do we make that happen after a retrieval? How do we make that happen on a forecheck, for example, or on the power play, or after a face-off, whatever. And but I would say like the I would divide it into two different things: the what is controllable and what is controllable. I would mean the attitude related, discipline related, character related. That has nothing to do with your talent or your skill level or whatever. Those are the things that we will hold them accountable for every day. And then the technical or tactical part of the game, we try to simplify as much as possible. And obviously, that's on us coaches to help them understand, develop, improve, so they know what to do in the different situations. Um, but I give you an example. For example, and when I talk concept based, I would say, okay, for us in two, we want to win the puck back as quick as we can.
yeah,
So let's say our forecheck, you can talk 1-1-1-3 forecheck, or 2-1-2, or a 1-2-2, or you can call it whatever you want. But I think you have to break it down to what do we want to happen. And we're talking simple terms, simple terminology like F1, your job is to put pressure on the puck.
yeah.
F2, your job is to provide support as quick as you can. F3, you're the balance guy that is going to allow us to stay connected as a unit. You're never allowed to lose your position as F3 or end up on the wrong side of the play or the puck, right?
Can I
So,
ask a question
yep,
about
please.
that? So, and I think this is just really important. So, I think when a lot of us think about the forecheck, we envision the diagram of the rink, north south, and we envision the coach putting the puck in a corner, and somebody is just has the label of F1 the entire shift. Somebody's the F2, and I think that's our visualization. But when I hear you explain that, would it be fair to say that what you're talking about is that wherever the puck is in relation on the ice, F1 is probably the closest player to that puck,
Yeah.
and F2 is probably the second closest player to the puck, and F3 is the third closest player to the puck, and that's how Um, and when you talk about players having to make decisions in a split second, that if they have to in their mind mentally think about that diagram and say, okay, like where am I on that diagram versus just saying, hey, like the puck's there and there's no other player with a jersey similar to mine between me and the puck, I got to go.
Exactly. So that's I mean, then I'd rather encourage them that we have two F1s. If you're not sure, like the pressure support guy, I don't care which one of you is closest, both go. But the F3, you're the one furthest away from the puck, usually on the weak side of the puck. You make sure that you stay patient and you control the middle of the ice and you get as close as you can without ending up on the wrong side of their F3, for example. Uh, but then you give them pretty clear, simple instructions. And we would bring that back in D zone as well. Okay, in D zone, what's our first intention? Our first goal is to win the puck back as quick as possible so we don't spend too much time in D zone. All right, so D1, you get out and pressure. D2, you get out to support. D3, you're the balance guy. And then we can get the forwards down low to help out as well. But the D1, D2, D3 is the same terminology as we use on the forecheck with F1, F2, F3. So it's I think
Simple.
the challenge is to simplify the message as much as possible so you don't have to think too much on the ice.
Oh, Dan, I got to get you to come out and coach my son's 6-year-old team. We,
Yeah,
uh, but and I say that jokingly, but I think there's I think great coaches do simple best.
I think
As
that's
their coach.
that's the like I said when we started the interview, that's the hardest part in coaching to simplify or filter down information and simplify our message as much as possible.
Absolutely. I believe that good offense is or that coaches trusting players is a prerequisite to having a good offensive team. And hockey's a game of mistakes. And similar to baseball, you win the batting title by being successful 30% of the time. And I think that good offensive players probably their success rate when they're trying to make plays probably land in that same percentage range. So that means that as a coach, you've got to live with turnovers. You've got to live with players, things not being successful. Um, how do you view? How do you balance maybe the trust that you put into players, and how they play with the puck and drive offense?
Like number one, I think you have to teach them risk management. I usually when I show the turnovers, if we have a lot of them, or if we did a poor job managing the puck, you can show them the turnovers and ask them like, is this if you succeeded here, what would it lead to? And you will ask them, okay, was it worth the risk? Because right now there's a scoring chance the other way, and they will go no. Okay, so I mean that's one way of giving them a visual of the risk management. Secondly, I would say it's very important for us coaches to understand what happens most often in games. What are the events that are frequently happening in games, and how do we approach them? So you said turnovers as an example. Like I would say that the zone exits is one thing I learned from the analytical guys is that that's the second tagged event during a hockey game. Zone exits. So do we practice it enough? Do we have a clear enough plan for it? Um, and do we set them up to succeed there? Maybe more than, like you said, 30%, or what's relevant, and what happens when we don't succeed? Are we can we take calculated risks?
Yeah,
So when you break it down like that, you would say, okay, yeah, that's it's worth taking the risk, and we have layers of security here to cover up if the pass doesn't go through, or if there is a turnover here, we still get two layers of security that should be able to uh, keep the puck away from our net. And but if we succeed, we might beat three guys up ice and get a great odd man rush from it, for example.
sounds
Uh,
like we're playing blackjack now.
Yeah, and also on entries, like I think that's also a lot of things we can learn from the analytics. How dangerous is a 3-on-2 situation? That's something in Europe that we've been practicing. Maybe just traditionally, it's been a part of practice every day, more or less. We practice 2-on-1s, we practice 3-on-2s. But how often do you practice 4-on-3s? And we saw the expected goals from a 2-on-1, from a 3-on-2, and from a 4-on-3, and we saw that the 4-on-3s are much more dangerous than a 3-on-2. And we're
Interesting.
like, why don't we practice 4-on-3s more, or a 3-on-2? Is it actually worth taking the risk of trying to force a play on the offensive blue line every time, or should we be happy creating some zone time from it if we can attack the net right away? So those are risk management that we try
Sure.
to teach the team and clarify for the players early in the season that, hey, this is not worth the risk. While this is a calculated risk that we're willing to take, but we need you guys to stop and stay if there is a mistake or a turnover somewhere, and take responsibility and to cover up for your friend that turned over the puck this time. Next time it might be you. He'll
Yeah.
stop.
So, and what I'm hearing there is that it's really important to define how you react to a positive outcome, but also a negative outcome, and perhaps not saying it's a negative, it's a mistake, you're going to get sat on the bench. It's more, hey, like we already know that there's going to be some negative outcomes, so we're just prepared for. We've got a game plan for that too.
Exactly. I mean, that's just I don't know. It's the fantasy from us coaches that we think that we're going to play a game without making mistakes. We're going to
Yeah,
play a game without turning over the puck. If you want to win something, it's the same thing. You go into a casino. You have to risk something if you want
yeah,
to win something, right?
totally. Yeah,
And you said before that 30% is a good number driving your offense. If you succeed 30% of the time, you need to have a plan for the other 70% when you don't succeed. Uh, and I mean that's where the structure and the coaching come in. Okay, what if we are successful? Let's say just a number 50% of the time on our exits. What happened the other 50% of the time if we how do we cover up for it?
yeah, and I just as you're saying that, I mean, just as as a framework, I mean, every coach listening to this would most likely trade their existing power play for percentage for a power play that clicked at 30% of the time when they've got an extra player on
Exactly.
the ice. So, um, yeah, so true. It's interesting, Dan. I don't speak Swiss or German or whatever language you're generally interviewed in. So my googling to learn about you wasn't as successful as I would have liked it to be in preparation for this. But the one word that came up a lot was possession, and it seemed that your style of play or your team in Zug that was very much focused on um, a possession brand of hockey. How do you implement that in practice? If I came to a Zug practice, what would I see where I might say, "Oh, that's reinforcing those types of possession habits"?
I think when people speak possession, it's they get a picture in their head that might be realistic. So they will see tape to tape passes, holding on to the puck on breakouts, tape to tape passes on every entry, four passes in the ozone, tic tac toe, backdoor tap in. Uh, that's all nice if you manage to do it, but that's not realistic that that's going to happen all the time. So I would say, obviously, every coach wants to play a possession style game because the more you have the puck, it's harder for the opposition to score on you, right? But I would say that a lot of the possession happens indirect. So it might be a bad word in hockey is dumping. I hate the word dumping, but it's a common word, so it makes everybody understand what you're talking about.
Yeah,
But I would say if you want to keep possession of the puck on an entry
Yeah.
and you can't skate it in, like we talk about, like keep your speed at the blue line. If you can skate it in, perfect. If you can pass it in on the tape, make sure it's there. But don't stop at the blue line. Keep your speed. So if you have to chip it in, make sure that it drives our possession. So one guy's, I call it an area play. Put it in an area where we're going to be first on it. And it might be a rim against certain opponents. It might be a soft chip against other opponents. It might be just a, I don't know the perfect English word for that, chip behind a defenseman in an area that you can skate into and still attack the net, for example. And it's the same thing on breakouts. You might have a plan to break the puck out and chip it off the board, but it still drives possession because you know that somebody's skating into that area. And the most important thing, if you want to play a possession game or possession style, is the four guys away from the puck. How quick can they support the puck and where do they need to be to support the puck? So the puck carrier can make quick decisions and he knows where to put it right away before even getting the puck, right? So you would hear me on practice yelling, quicker support, get to your support areas. We need to be faster. And I will 9 out of 10 times put the blame on the puck carrier if you're not successful breaking out or entering the zone with possession.
Is that I guess that's it sounds like very much a mindset to instill in your players that of how they play without the puck and does that in your experience is does that take time
Yep.
to yeah.
You have your values, and puck possession might be one of those values that, hey, we want to, when people come pay a ticket to watch us play, we want them to see a fast, intense, active team that keeps the puck going and getting open for each other. All right, and that then you need a certain behavior for that to happen. And then you come into the routines. The routines, that's your practices, the behavior that happens on a consistent basis all the time, right? And if you like it or not, or want it or not, they're gonna form habits. They might be great habits, but they might also be crappy habits that are not gonna help you. And at the end of the day, that's gonna form the culture as well. Like, is the culture sound in our club or in our team, or do we practice the way we want to and need to live up to our identity or values, or do we is our behavior is not strong enough? And there's a lot of discomfort in that you have
For
to
sure.
embrace.
I, and I think that what I'm hearing is, the values give you, it's, it's something that grounds your team that you can always go back to instead of saying we need to work hard or we need to pay attention. It's, hey, we talked about this at the start of the year. Does that behavior relate to that? And I know that sounds really simple, but I mean, I think sometimes we, I think again, it puts the onus. I would sense that maybe values help put the onus on the player.
Yes.
Again, where it's not they're not doing something because you tell them to do it. You're just helping them realize that we decided this is how we're all going to behave, and it's it's not a punishment. It's yeah,
And that's where I come back to that shared ownership.
yeah,
So at the start of the year, from the team's identity, philosophy, strategy, call it whatever you want, the players themselves decide the values of that group that year. This is something we're going to make important every day. And usually those are non-skilled, talented, technical, tactical related. They're more attitude, discipline, character related. And
yeah,
that's something I think everybody needs to be pushed and coached and I call it like push them out of their comfort zone and hold them accountable for that. And the better the player, the more they need it, but the more usually the best players embrace it as well. Um, and the technical, tactical part of it, that's up to us coaches to help them solve situations. So yeah, it's easier said than done, but it's easier to put on the players or somebody else, give them the ownership of the attitude related stuff. Like, did you actually skate as hard as you could there? Did you do your best to stay in the shooting lane? Did you drive the net there? Did you skate to the bench? Or did you change when you could? Or did you stay on for an extra 20 seconds there? Like those simple stuff, you can keep them, or they have to take ownership of it. And if you have a strong core of players that have been there for a long time, those will be your best ambassadors.
You know
Right.
what? It's funny, and I acknowledge that we're coaching at very different levels. But I do coach my son's 6-year-old team, and when I first got involved, I realized how how far out of my element I was. But I think this maybe provides a really great example. Is we kind of figured out that the core to winning, or the core to being successful coaching 6-year-olds, is you need to teach them how to listen and make eye contact. And we just put the emphasis on, you listen on one knee and you make eye contact. And that was step one. And when we got that, everything else seemed to just work a lot easier. And it's funny today, like we know within the first 60 seconds of a practice if we're going to have a really good day or an okay day based on how they show up and how many kids just automatically come to the whistle, get on one knee and make eye contact. And it's funny, I think I take that in my daily life, and I see so many correlations to how that same principle plays out in so many facets of our life, that it's those first principles of how you show up influence the big picture.
But I also think, if I can just
Yeah.
add something there, like the big difference there is how you ask the questions to the players, or
Yeah.
you can say pay attention, and then the 6-year-old, they don't know. Okay, how do I do that? But when you break it down and you say everybody down on one knee, and you make eye contact, all right, now I have to think.
Yeah.
So
It's
now
clear.
we're breaking it down. It's the same for professional athletes. You can't use words that are big and that they feel you're not speaking directly to them. But if you tell them, like you just said, now you're on one knee and you make eye contact and you look at them and their eyes are somewhere else, then it's easy to say, hey, Aaron, eye contact, please. And okay, now you got his full attention, right?
Yeah. Listen, I know this isn't the first time I've said this on the show, but if I had a time machine, I would have gone back and coached little kids before coaching big kids in junior and college hockey, and it would have just equipped me with so many more tools, and really just sort of those, reinforce some of those fundamentals. Um, Dan, I'm curious about this, just given the part of the world that you've been coaching in for the last 7 years. I don't doubt that there's any shortage of really intelligent people across all sorts of industries and walks of life. Um, but it would appear that there's a lot of really smart people when it comes to sports. And so, going back to the question of practice, I've become recently super obsessed with soccer or football drills, specifically around passing and how they've created. They don't use the goaltender like that. That's what stood out to me right away, is that they had so many drills where they're controlling the ball, but there's no shot at the end. But they've kind of made these drills dynamic and fun. And I put myself in the player situation. I'm like, no, this would be a real challenge. I could see where this wouldn't be a monotonous, boring task. For example, I've had a virtual tour of your training facility, and I had smoke coming out of my ears. Like, there was so much cool stuff going on there. So I guess, I mean, just maybe things that you've. I'll reframe the question. What are maybe some non-hockey related skills or experiences that you've had at your time in Zug that have influenced how you show up as a coach and lead your team?
I mean, you learn all the time. You get hopefully wiser every year, both on a personal note and also as a hockey coach, hopefully. But I'm fortunate enough to work in a very special environment.
Yeah.
You just mentioned it. We have probably one of the most impressive training facilities in the world. It's called OYM, so on your marks, for those of you who wants to go in and take
And
a look at
please
it.
go check it out. It's wild.
Uh, but one thing is that you get in contact with other coaches from other sports and other athletes doing other sports. That's very, like, you learn a lot from them and you see things from their perspective. Individual sports, for example, the Swiss skiers who are among, if not the best in the world, the alpine skiers, how their approach to their performances and how they work with their coaches, and how that's different to hockey coaches or team sports when you can always hide behind somebody else, for example. Also, how we made OIM holistic, concept based training or performance based support for every athlete, and we try to make that individual for the hockey player as well. So I learned how important nutrition is. um, uh, I thought I knew a lot about nutrition until I met some of the top nutritionists in the world, and it changed my view totally. How important recovery is, and how many different parts that goes into recovery, that you don't think about much as a coach. You think about, okay, how am I going to prepare them for the next game, and maybe the pulsation of practice, but what happens between practice and the game. Um, so I learned a lot from other people here, but I would say my absolute constant in being a coach is the importance of creating and valuing relationship, creating or
Yeah.
shaping relationship with players, with colleagues. I think that's the most important skill you can have, to be able to connect with other people, listen to other people, learn from other people, and also be interesting to them. So you have
Yeah.
something to offer. Uh, for me, I would say also the ability to delegate, to get people to take ownership of different tasks in hand that will make them grow as people and be a much more valuable asset on your staff or on your team, or a better tool for you and allow you to look much smarter and better as a head coach.
I just want to highlight something you just said that I find really interesting, and it said that you have to be interesting to them, and this goes back, um, gosh, years ago. We had Ken Hitchcock on the show, and he talked about when he went to St. Louis. He got hired. It was early in the season, and he ends up winning the Jack Adams Award as the top coach. And again, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but effectively, he was saying, like, he lived in a world where he had blinders on, where all he thought about 24/7 was hockey. And he realized that with athletes today, that he needed to find ways to connect with them outside of the game. So one of the examples he gave was that, at that era, guys were plugging in their iPods to the stereo system in the room. So he would go in and he'd go through and see what music they were listening to, go Google it and learn about the artists, where they came from. So now we had a way to talk to the players. And he recognized that he needed to collect more information so that he could have conversations, maybe more meaningful or interesting conversations with the players, which of course are going to inform the type of relationship that you have with those people. Um, when you talk about being interesting to the players, what does that mean to you?
Like I said earlier here, I think number one thing is to try to understand their perspective.
Yeah.
Who are they as people? What is important for them? What drives them? And then, okay, how do I approach them? How can I approach this guy to make myself interested or open up a interesting conversation? And I think all those you have to, as a coach, and especially as a head coach, try to de-dramatize the coach-player interaction, the meeting with the coach. So if
Yeah.
I call in the player to my office, like, hey, you there, number 96, 10 minutes in my office, then it's going to be wondering what's going to happen with this. But if I can approach the player very naturally, talk about things, ask them a lot of questions, find out what they're taking, this whole coach player conversation is a very natural part of the daily operations, and you get to understand them on a much deeper level. And first, then, when you understand them on a deeper level, you get the tools and understanding how to help them, how to approach them, and how to unleash the power of their potential,
Yeah.
because you know how to talk to them, I would say.
I love that you said unleash. That was another word along with possession that came up in a lot of the research I did. I think what you just said is so important though, Dan, because I think that for certainly myself, and I think a lot of coaches listening to this, you were kind of given two tools. You were allowed to scream and yell at players, or you could pat them on the back, and it was that black and white, and you
Yeah,
had to pick one
exactly.
or the other. And um, an example that just like comes to mind. I'm watching Amazon's the All or Nothing series on Manchester City with Pep Guardiola. If you didn't know who the coach was in that show, in terms of how they interact with the players, you might not guess it's him because he is so engaging with the players and their conversation. He gives them hugs after games. He's in there celebrating after big wins. He's just being a human being in the moment. And I think we all need to see more examples of that. I think it's healthy.
I think that's you got to be you got to be the best version of yourself as well. You have to understand, like, you have to stay true to your, can I say, normal personality, and obviously you will add an extra layer to that personality depending on which environment you're in. So you're in the team with the players, you would take the head coach hat on, and you add some maybe defense layers to that personality, but you can't walk too far away from it, because then it's not authentic anymore. There's not a lot of guys like Pep Guardiola, like you just talked about, and I couldn't be exactly like him, but I have to be authentic to my own personality, and at the same time interact and with the players as much as possible. So even with the assistant coaches, we say, okay, we come in early in the morning, but when the players come in, we're in the room. We're talking to different players. We're interacting with the team. We're not set in our coach's room and the players are in the locker room and there's no interaction there at all. And
Do,
I
do,
think
do you
that's an
do you
important thing.
think like what you just described there is like, I mean, you just talked about like that. I think we can all relate to it. You get called into the coach's office, and it's sort of like getting called into the principal's office. Is part of the strategy as simple as saying, "Hey, like I don't need to call anybody into my office. I'm just going to go meet them where they are," and that the environment itself changes the conversation and
100%.
de-escalates. Yeah.
I mean,
So
all
I
those
so I think it's so
informal
great.
meetings, the more informal meetings, the better. If
Yeah.
it's, and it might be 30 seconds one day, 10 seconds one day,
Totally.
but sometimes it's 5 minutes. But when it happens without a set time or date, like, now we're gonna have a meeting, then it's just a normal conversation between two people, and nobody has their defenses or their guard up, because it's just natural.
Totally. Dan, I know we got to get you on the couch for puck drop here. But I got a handful of more questions that I want to get to. Zug wins back-to-back championships, 2021, 2022. Again, on paper, tracking your path to those championships would appear to be very different. Notably, in year two, you come back from 3-0 in the final series. You ring off four straight wins to capture the win. What was the same about those two journeys to the championships, and what was different?
First of all, there was nine new players the second year, so
Wow.
it was a big turnover in the roster.
No kidding.
Um, Secondly, is usually you got a drop off after winning, because there's a lot of new things happening after winning. You do a lot of good things. You win a championship, and all of a sudden there's a lot of other stuff that you're not used to that comes into play, like marketing stuff, media stuff. You get
Sure.
much more attention, and so on. So that next year was kind of different. There was a lot of things that we, and also what was special, it was COVID year. So it was a
Of
lockdown,
course.
and all of a sudden everything opened up. So we didn't get to celebrate the title the first time. And when the next season started, we spent the first month celebrating last year's title. So I was like, hey guys, we got to focus on what's happening right now. We got to stop celebrating last year's title here and get our focus right. But the good thing is we had a strong core of players that also felt that the turbulence that comes with a turnover of 9 players, the difference between not winning a title in 23 years and all of a sudden winning in a COVID year when nobody gets to celebrate, and everything that comes with that. But I believe that turning that 3-0 around the second year came from just a strong belief and a strong culture that has been developing over time. So we were down 3-0, and there was not a lot of stress in our team. We felt like, hey, we've been playing pretty good here, but we didn't get rewarded for it. And going back to playing the odds, I was like, okay, guys, you know what the saying is, like the house always wins at the end, right? So just we don't change much,
Yeah.
just try to increase the temperature a little bit, and we keep believing in ourselves. And now we gotta control like don't get, can I say, distracted by anyone. Don't allow yourselves to get distracted by anyone. We've been doing this for such a long time. We know what we can do here. So don't allow anybody to tell you what you can or can't do now. If we can exclude those distractions, we're going to give ourselves a chance to win tomorrow's game, and then the next game, and then we won the next game, and all of a sudden the momentum changed, and we won it at the end. But I think it was just a product of long term working with the strong core of players that just everybody kept believing and stayed focused on a few things that we made important over time.
I don't know if you define it as a mantra, but I love the mantra "the house always wins," and what a great mindset to instill in your team. You win that. You come back from 3-0. You win that series against the Lions. Great footage of the bench conversations too. Very exciting in that series. When you were asked what the key was, you did not hesitate in your post game interview. You said right away. You said it was the humans. It was the people that had surrounded you. So again, I'm doing my research. I watched that interview and that interaction, and then I go back to, we've got a Norwegian hockey coach, coaching in Switzerland by way of Sweden, and I go in and I start doing a dive into your background growing up in Norway, and I knew a little bit about this. I'm good pals with Tobias Johansson, the head coach of the Norwegian national team, and he shared a lot about the structure of sports in Norway. But I did a deep dive, and I was fascinated. That per capita, you could argue that Norway is the best sporting country in the world in terms of just participation, the amount of athletes they elevate to the top of their respective sport or field. But it all seemed to be rooted in the social aspect of sports. It seems that below the ages of 13, sports is very much a vehicle to bring communities together, to bring cultures together, society together, and it's very much it's a human side. Um, so my first question is, how much of who you are as a coach is rooted in growing up in that type of environment? And it would appear to have that the human side of sport being just front and center.
I truly believe that in sports or in business or in any relation, you have to see the person first. like the human first. Like there's so many soft factors that you have to take care of. If you want to be really good at something, you have to be truly passionate about it. It has to be fun. It has to be the only thing that you want to do when you wake up, or when you have to really enjoy going to work every day. And my job as a coach doesn't matter if it's on a professional level or if it's your kids that are 6 years old. I have to make it fun. I have to be inspiring. And I have to make sure that, hey, when they come to work today, they're going to have a smile on their face and they're going to have fun doing it. They're going to love the practice or love playing the game. So like highlighting all those soft factors that makes it fun, and not highlighting all the stuff that the disappointments or the failures or I think that's a huge key on all levels. Um, and actually, we have a in Zug here as well. We have a pyramid. We call it like the I have to think what it's called in English, but education pyramid. Like our
Okay.
vision is that we're going to have 100 kids into our program.
And this is club wide. This isn't
Yeah,
just
this is club-wise.
yeah,
So
yeah,
100 young kids coming into the hockey school every day, every
yeah,
year.
yeah.
So we have 100 kids applying for hockey school, getting introduced to the game of hockey, right? And from those 100 kids, we want 10 of them to get accepted to our academy when they're 16 years old. And from those 10, one should be able to go out to play professional. So it's 1%. That's our vision. And if we can get to one, that's great. But that's a great view of how hard it is to go all the way into professional sports. But just as important is what happens to the other 99 kids. How can we keep them interested in hockey? How can we nurture their interest or love of the game, the passion of the game? They might be coaches like I am. I didn't have a successful playing career, so I went into the next best thing that was coaching. Some becomes referees. Some are maybe partners or sponsors or to my team right now, but they still have the passion for the game, but they're doing it in different roles, right?
Or maybe they oversee 15 people in a construction business and they make it fun for those people, and those people that work for them go home and have dinner with their families in a better mood, and they're better dads, husbands and fathers or spouses
Exactly.
because I think that's so important. And
And I
yeah,
mean, I think an important lesson that I try to hold myself accountable all the time is that all you have as a coach is your integrity. And at the end of the day, you can't guarantee titles or a certain amount of wins or success. But as long as you treat people with respect. You can be hard on them and you can be demanding, but you treat them with respect and you try to make it fun. Uh, you always have a lot of strong relationships, even long after they're on another team or they retired from the game or whatever it might be. And this is something I think is the most important thing that you can have when you have the power of being a head coach or you're in charge of a team or a group of people, that you try to influence them in a positive way. And I think we all have that one teacher from school that we remember, hey, he was pretty good or she was pretty good and I liked
yeah,
her. I have no interest in math, but she was good. Or
yeah,
I had no interest in biology until I met him.
yeah.
And that's the coach that I think all of us should try to be. And you're not going to be able to do it all the time, but if you have that vision in mind, then hopefully guys are going to have some fun. And I think that's also the biggest key to be successful on all different levels. If you're a 6 year old or if you're coaching professional, doesn't change anything.
So great segue, Dan. Talk about relationships. On this side of the pond, when I look at So this is what we're used to in North America. In the NFL, we have Black Monday. The Monday after the regular season, we just fire a bunch of coaches. In hockey, in the National Hockey League, um, um, the average tenure of an NHL head coach is just a shade over 3 seasons. So you're a dinosaur for the run you've had in Zug. But when
Oh
I
yeah.
look at it from this side, it's mid-season. You're going to Rogla at the end of the
Not
season.
bad.
I really play. Yeah,
Not
I
bad.
literally have it written down here. The sounds here. So coaching myself. Ricard Ronberg's leaving for Olunda. He's coming to the Swiss league. Like there is this. It's mid-season, and um, these coaches are leaving. And again, my reaction is when I'm reading about all this, I'm like, something must be wrong. There must be broken relationships. Like how could it in our sport, like the thought that you could make a decision to leave one place and still coach the team and still show up and maintain those relationships. Like it was really hard for me to wrap my head around that. But the more reading I did, it again, I'm just relying on the internet here. It seemed very amicable and professional and reasonable that organizations and teams had maybe made these decisions, or my understanding is in your case you asked to be let out of your contract. Um, so all that is to say, like when you talk about the importance of relationships, how much does that play into this just being part of, in the same way that people in every other walk of life, they change jobs. It doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means they move on, they evolve, and that this is a maybe this. I just feel like there's something we can all learn from this.
I don't know. I mean, it's first of all, I have to say it's not that different in Europe either. I think during my 7 years here in Switzerland, over 70 head coaches. I've seen more than 70 head coaches come and go.
Wow.
So that's a big turnover on coaches here as well. But it's special to stay in one place for such a long time as a coach. The
Yeah.
normal way of parting ways would be that you get let go, you get fired.
Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned Roger there in Frölunda, and I think it goes for all coaches that have been in one place for a long time. They earn their respect among the fan base, among the players in the
Yeah.
organization, among the media people, whatever. So, and I'm not trying in any way to compare, but I mean, there's a well-known Netflix series, The Last Dance, where the Chicago Bulls
Yeah.
plays their last season with Phil Jackson as a coach, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, how the players supported him and then made this like, hey, this is our last dance together. Let's make it.
Yeah.
If you are there for a long time, I think the players will support you until the end of the road. If you supported them and treated them well for a long time as well. I mean, in my case, I had some family reasons why I wanted to move back to Sweden, where my family is, and they accepted, they understand, and there was no hard feelings at all from the team about that. And I think it's also fair to the management and to the organization that you say, hey, I think I need to do this, instead of waiting until you get let go and then there's a bad ending of things. And now they had a lot of time to figure out what they wanted to do next, who's the predecessor got to be, and how they want to move forward, instead of doing it, okay, now I'm out, gone, you figure it out. Now they had, I told them in November, I think October, November, and now they had a whole season to figure it out. But it doesn't change my focus or presence or drive to win another championship here. More maybe the opposite. You really want to do everything in your power to finish off on a high note.
Uh, yeah. You know what? I bet. I listen to this podcast. It's called Masters of Scale. It's done by Reed Hastings, who's a co-founder of LinkedIn, and he's a big Silicon Valley guy. But he talks a lot about professionally, like the days of working for one company and you retire and you get the set of steak knives or the gold watch. Like those don't exist anymore. Like people, and he refers to it as a tours of duty. And he said, when both parties accept that this probably isn't forever, but that we can have an amicable split at some point, but the organization recognizes that, hey, I want to have a positive impact on the quality of your life professionally and otherwise because of your time here. And at the same token, that the individual recognizes that, hey, like I want to have a really positive impact on the organization, knowing that it's not my forever. It's not the only thing I'm going to accomplish, but I want to leave with, where both sides can leave pride. I just sense that, sports needs that, a little bit, or at least an injection of that would be really
I think
healthy.
a very important thing to take into consideration as well is that as a coach, you need to give 100% of yourself every
Totally.
day,
Yeah.
365 days a year, every day. Like you can't come in and I have a bad day, I'm in a bad mood today. Like you gotta empower people around you. You got to spread positive energy. You got to get people. You got to demand the best from everyone around you every day. It doesn't matter if the sun is shining or if it's raining or if it's dark or you've got 5 losses in your backpack or whatever it is. And after there's going to be an expansion day when how long you can do that in the same place or when the players also need some new stimuli. They need a new voice, maybe they need to hear some new words. They need a new um, coach. Simple, plain and simple. And I think a wise man once said, like, coaching a team is like holding a bird in your hand, right? If you hold it too loose, it's gonna fly away. If you hold it too tight, you're gonna strangle it. But sooner or later, you hold that bird, it's going to have to take a shit sooner or later. Can I say that in your podcast, or are you
Oh
going to get
yeah, that's
canceled?
totally good. You know what? I was on every word there. I thought I was about to cry. I thought that's where that was going. And then
No, but with that said, I love the players.
yeah,
But
totally.
if you
Yeah,
have the same core of players for too long, I think they deserve to have another coach as well.
yeah.
And maybe I also need like a new challenge after a long time in the same place. You need a new trigger.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a good example, but
No, I think that's a good example. And you know what, man, selfishly, I'd love to. I'll tell you what, I would love to do this again 12 months from now, and just, I think that, I think we can all relate as human beings that sometimes life gives us a bit of a blank canvas, and sometimes you just can't. It's tough to take all the knowledge you've acquired and experiences you've acquired and apply it when you're in the same place. Like sometimes that change of scenery just allows you to reinvent and push yourself in different ways. So, um, Dan, before we let you go, I'd be so curious, when you're not in the office, when you're not in the dressing room talking with your players, um, podcasts, books, what are some things that have maybe influenced you or that you go to give yourself some, help yourself build some good habits?
I love history. A lot of the wars that played out in the world and throughout the time. I said in earlier interviews, like Winston Churchill is a person that I have a lot of admiration for, good and bad. But I learned a lot about him, read a lot about him, and I mean the way he inspired not only the whole nation on the Britain during the World War II, but more or less the whole Europe during World War II, and kept the belief up, and that was the way he could communicate was very very impressive. So some historical figures that I draw a lot of inspiration from. Um, That I find interesting and inspirational to read about. Successful people in general in business, and or politicians or coaches or but I am also a big fan of the social psychological part of try to read some books on, for example, habits. uh, there are a lot of good books about behaviors in general and things that we take for granted that we don't think about that happens every day, and how you can change your routines or your day a little bit to the better. Those are things I find inspirational and interesting.
Love it. Dan, this was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck to you and Zug the rest of the way here, and to you and your family in making that transition to Angleholm. And we'll go
Thank
next
you
year.
very much. Thanks for having me on the show.